21. Old country music stars who are buried in the weirdest places. You won't believe where some of country music's biggest legends ended up. From hidden desert cremations to Greek-style marble tombs. These aren't your typical final resting places. Some graves are practically secret, others look like shrines built for royalty. But what do these bizarre burial choices say about the stars we thought we knew? Stay with us as we uncover the strange, sacred, and downright shocking graves of 21 country icons. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell because on Uncovered Tinseltown, uncovered, the truth is never buried for long. Glen Campbell. Glen Campbell was a rhinestone in human form, sparkling, resilient, and born to shine. Born in 1936 in Arkansas, Campbell's blend of country pop and guitar virtuosity earned him chart success with classics like Wichita Lineman Galveston and Rhinestone Cowboy. Beyond music, he was also a Hollywood favorite, appearing in films and hosting his own TV variety show. But behind the glitter was a man battling darkness. Campbell struggled with addiction for years and was later diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2011. Even as his memory faded, he continued to tour, courageously documenting his decline in the heartbreaking documentary I'll Be Me. He passed away in 2017 at the age of 81. His burial is where things take a surprising turn. Campbell is laid to rest in a private family cemetery in Billstown, Arkansas, on a quiet patch of land known as Campbell Cemetery. What makes it truly unusual are the symbols etched onto his headstone, Jewish icons such as menorahs and the Star of David. For many fans who associated Campbell with Christian roots, gospel influences, and Southern values, these symbols were unexpected, even puzzling. His gravestone also features Psalm 23, bridging both faiths with a verse cherished by believers of all backgrounds. In a world where final resting places often mimic celebrity personas, Glen's grave defies categorization. It's spiritual, symbolic, and deeply personal, just like the man himself. In the end, the cowboy may have ridden off into the sunset, but his tombstone still shines with mystery and grace. Kenny Rogers. Kenny Rogers was more than a country singer. He was a storyteller, a crossover sensation, and a pop culture icon. Born in 1938 in Houston, Texas, Rogers gave the world unforgettable hits like Lucille the Gambler and Islands in the Stream. His gravelly voice, silver beard, and wise lyrics made him a musical mentor to generations. He retired in 2017 and passed away peacefully in 2020 at the age of 81. But because his death occurred during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, no large funeral was held, leaving many fans feeling robbed of a chance to say goodbye properly. Yet what truly surprises visitors is his final resting place. Kenny Rogers is buried at Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta, Georgia, in a massive black marble tomb that resembles a Greek temple. The structure stands tall with 6 thick columns, a domed roof, and a circular engraving that reads, "Will the circle be unbroken?" Among modest headstones, Rogers' tomb rises like royalty, unexpectedly grand even for a man of his fame. It's so elaborate it feels less like a musician's grave and more like a monument to an ancient philosopher or emperor. That's what makes it weird, but also fitting. Kenny always knew how to leave an impression, and now even in death he remains impossible to miss. For a man who once sang, "You've got to know when to hold 'em," his resting place shows he knew exactly when to make a statement. Keith Whitley. Keith Whitley's voice could stop a room cold, pure, emotional, and haunting in a way that felt almost too real. Born Jackie Keith Whitley in Kentucky in 1954, he seemed destined for country greatness from a young age. His smooth, aching delivery on tracks like Don't Close Your Eyes and Miami, My Amy turned him into a rising star of the late 1980s. But while his songs climbed the charts, Whitley quietly battled alcoholism behind closed doors. That battle ended tragically on May 9, 1989, when he was found dead in his home at just 34 years old. His blood alcohol content was more than 5 times the legal limit, an ending that devastated the country music world. What makes Keith Whitley's final resting place so unusual isn't a grand monument or elaborate mausoleum, it's the stark simplicity. He's buried at Spring Hill Cemetery in Nashville, Tennessee, in a quiet, unassuming plot that could be easily missed if you weren't looking for it. There are no flashy tributes, no massive tombstones, just a modest headstone under the shade of old trees. For fans who remember how powerful his voice was, the contrast is jarring. A man whose songs filled arenas now rests in near silence between ordinary stones in a space that feels heartbreakingly humble. Yet maybe that's fitting. Keith Whitley never chased the spotlight, he just sang from the soul. In death, as in life, he remains understated but unforgettable. His grave may not scream for attention, but it whispers a legacy that still echoes through country music. Gram Parsons. Gram Parsons was never just a country artist. He was a cosmic cowboy, a boundary breaker who blended country with rock long before the world was ready. Born Ingram Cecil Connor III in 1946, Parsons played with the Byrds and co-founded the Flying Burrito Brothers, helping to birth what we now call Americana. But as visionary as he was musically, his life was chaotic and short. He died of a drug overdose in 1973 at just 26 years old. What happened after his death has become one of the most bizarre and legendary tales in country music history. Against the wishes of his family, Parsons' close friend and manager, Phil Kaufman, stole his body from LAX airport. The goal, to honor Parsons' wish to be cremated in Joshua Tree National Park, his spiritual sanctuary. Kaufman drove the casket into the desert, poured gasoline on it, and tried to cremate Parsons' body under the stars. He partially succeeded before being caught and let off with a small fine. Today, Gram Parsons' official burial site is a memorial marker at Joshua Tree, although his remains were eventually reinterred elsewhere. But fans still make pilgrimages to the original desert site now, a sacred spot for country rock devotees. His story blurs the lines between myth and music. Even in death, Parsons defied expectations, making his burial one of the strangest and most symbolic ever seen in country music. He didn't just leave behind songs, he left behind a legend. Lynn Anderson. Lynn Anderson was a powerhouse who burst onto the country scene with one of the genre's most iconic crossover hits, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. Born in 1947 in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and raised in California, she was practically born into country music. Her mother, Liz Anderson, was a songwriter. But Lynn's own voice style and stage presence made her unforgettable. She dominated the charts in the 70s and broke barriers by becoming the first female country star to headline Madison Square Garden. Yet for all her dazzling performances and achievements, her final resting place is almost startling in its simplicity. Anderson passed away in 2015 at the age of 67 from a heart attack following a battle with pneumonia. She was laid to rest in Woodlawn Memorial Park in Nashville, Tennessee, a cemetery that also holds many of country music's brightest stars. But unlike some of her peers with grand mausoleums or theatrical memorials, Lynn's grave is surprisingly plain. A modest marker displays her name and dates with no grand epitaph or ornate tribute. Still, fans don't let that simplicity silence her legacy. Visitors regularly leave flowers, handwritten letters, and photos, turning the small site into a living tribute. What makes her burial weird isn't anything outlandish, it's the contrast. A woman who lit up stadiums, who sang for presidents and fans worldwide, now rests quietly just a few feet from fellow legends. It feels almost like an underground reunion of Nashville royalty. Lynn Anderson's legacy lives on not just in her music, but in the quiet reverence of those who still find their way to her grave. Charlie Daniels. Charlie Daniels wasn't just a musician, he was a force. With his wild fiddle and booming voice, he gave us one of country's most unforgettable anthems, The Devil Went Down to Georgia. But behind the fiery music was a man just as bold in his beliefs. Born in 1936 in North Carolina, Daniels spent decades electrifying crowds with a mix of southern rock country and unapologetic grit. When he passed away in 2020 at the age of 83 from a hemorrhagic stroke, his legacy was already carved into country music history. Fittingly, his final resting place reflects the magnitude of his presence. Daniels is buried at Mount Juliet Memorial Gardens in Tennessee, and his grave is impossible to miss. A large black marble slab anchors the site, engraved with his full name, signature, birth, and death dates, and most strikingly, the complete text of Psalm 91, 1-8, a passage about protection and divine refuge. Nearby stands a permanent flower vase where fans continue to leave tributes, bouquets, American flags, handwritten prayers. The site is bold, outspoken, and impossible to ignore, just like the man it honors. What makes his grave unusual isn't just its size or scripture, but how it radiates Daniel's larger-than-life personality. Many country stars are laid to rest quietly, humbly. Not Charlie. His grave doesn't whisper, it declares. It's not a goodbye. It's a final verse played loud and clear. Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash wasn't merely the man in black, he was country music's beating heart. His gravelly voice sang of sin, redemption, and the human struggle like no one else. From I Walk the Line to Folsom Prison Blues, he became a symbol of American resilience. But Cash's story was more than just music, it was love. And nowhere is that more evident than in his final resting place. When his wife June Carter Cash passed away in May 2003, Johnny was devastated. The two had shared not only a stage, but a soul-deep connection. Just 4 months later, Johnny died from complications related to diabetes. He was buried beside June at Hendersonville Memory Gardens in Tennessee. But their grave isn't like the others. It looks less like a burial site and more like a tribute stage. A single large flat stone covers both plots, each with a gold-lettered plaque bearing their names, scripture, and signatures. At the head of the grave sits a black marble bench where visitors can sit, reflect, and quietly weep. This shared memorial isn't flashy, but it's powerful in its symbolism. It represents two legends united in death as in life. Fans from around the world visit, often leaving behind poems, guitars, wedding rings, even letters addressed to Johnny. What makes the Cash grave unusual isn't its design, but its presence. It doesn't try to impress, it invites. And that's perfectly fitting, because even in death, Johnny Cash still finds a way to connect through music, memory, and eternal love. Charlie Pride. Charlie Pride wasn't just a country singer, he was a pioneer who broke barriers and opened doors that once seemed locked forever. Born in 1934 in Mississippi, Pride rose from humble beginnings to become the first black superstar in country music. With hits like Kissin' Angel Good Morning and Is Anybody Going to San Antone, he earned 29 #1 singles and the respect of an entire genre that hadn't always been welcoming. He passed away in December 2020 at age 86 due to complications from COVID-19. His death marked the end of a groundbreaking chapter in country music history. But unlike many legends who rest in highly publicized mausoleums or fan-drenched memorials, Charlie Pride's final resting place remains relatively unknown to the public. He was buried at Calvary Hill Cemetery and Mausoleum in Dallas, Texas, a quiet site that reflects his modesty. What makes his burial unusual isn't anything flashy or extravagant. It's the silence. For someone who broke racial boundaries and stood on the grandest stages, his grave isn't a tourist stop. There are no towering monuments or engraved accolades, only peace, in a way that suits him. Charlie was never about the show, he was about the song. And maybe this quiet, uncelebrated resting place mirrors the quiet strength he carried throughout his life. For fans who do find their way there, it's not about spectacle. It's about paying tribute to a man who changed the industry by simply showing up, singing well, and never backing down. Johnny Paycheck, Donald Eugene Lytle. Johnny Paycheck lived his life like one of his songs, loud, reckless, and unapologetically real. Born Donald Eugene Lytle in 1938 in Ohio, he rose through the ranks of country music with a voice soaked in barroom sorrow and working-class grit. His biggest hit, Take This Job and Shove It, became an anthem of rebellion across America. But behind the outlaw image was a man often at war with himself. In 1985, his troubles turned violent when he shot a man in an Ohio bar and spent time behind bars. By the time of his death in 2003, from emphysema and asthma, Paycheck was broke and broken. His longtime friend George Jones quietly donated a burial plot for him. Paycheck now rests at Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. But what makes his grave unusual is how ordinary it is. For a man who stirred crowds and stirred trouble in equal measure, the final resting spot is strikingly modest. No grand statue, no outlaw flair, just a simple stone bearing his name. That contrast between his rowdy legend and his subdued grave leaves many fans with a strange feeling. It's as if the man who demanded attention in life now asks for none in death. Yet the legacy lives on. Because when people walk past that plain stone, they don't just see a name, they hear a voice raw and untamed, still pushing back. George Jones. George Jones didn't just sing heartbreak, he made it sound holy. Born in 1931 in Texas, Jones became known as the Possum and delivered one of the most iconic country voices of all time. His ballads, like He Stopped Loving Her Today, weren't just songs, they were emotional sermons. And while his talent was unmatched, so was his personal chaos, failed marriages, arrests, and a near-fatal drinking habit that nearly destroyed him. When Jones passed away in 2013 at age 81, the country music world paused to mourn a man who defined the genre's soul. His funeral was packed with legends and admirers alike, but his final resting place at Woodlawn Memorial Park Cemetery in Nashville has a curious twist. The grave is modest, but what makes it weird isn't its size, it's what happens around it. Jones's gravesite has become a pilgrimage destination. Fans leave flowers, whiskey bottles, notes, and guitars. The site even features a quote from his most famous song, He Stopped Loving Her Today. This strange energy surrounds his plot, a mix of reverence and ritual. Unlike other celebrity graves that grow dusty with time, Jones's site is alive with offerings and grief. It's as if fans keep coming not to say goodbye, but to keep the love going. In death as in life, George Jones remains a country altar. His voice may be silent, but at his grave you can still hear echoes of love loss and the long road that never truly ends. Waylon Jennings. Waylon Jennings was the rebel king of country music, a man who kicked down Nashville's doors and did things his own way. Born in 1937 in Littlefield, Texas, Jennings helped pioneer the outlaw country movement alongside Willie Nelson and others who rejected the polished Nashville sound. His rough vocals and gritty spirit-powered hits like Luckenbach, Texas, Good-Hearted Woman, and Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys. But Waylon's life wasn't all guitars and gravel. He battled addiction for years, eventually losing part of his foot to diabetes. When he passed away in 2002 at the age of 64, the country world lost one of its fiercest voices. Jennings is buried at City of Mesa Cemetery in Arizona, and while his grave isn't grand in size, it's powerful in message. The headstone is engraved with a photograph of Jennings, a Bible verse from Song of Solomon, and the deeply personal inscription, a vagabond dreamer, a rhymer and singer of songs, a revolutionary in country music beloved by the world. What makes his grave unusual is how perfectly it captures his soul. It's not about flash, it's about truth. The placement, the wording. Even the stone itself feels like a final act of rebellion. Waylon may be gone, but the legend still rides. Jerry Reed. Jerry Reed Hubbard. Jerry Reed wasn't just a country artist, he was a walking, picking, wisecracking spectacle. Born Jerry Reed Hubbard in 1937, he dazzled fans with his lightning-fast guitar skills, signature drawl, and larger-than-life charisma. Known for hits like Eastbound and Down and When You're Hot, You're Hot. Reed was also a beloved actor, lighting up the screen in Smokey and the Bandit alongside Burt Reynolds. Reed passed away in 2008 from complications due to emphysema at age 71. For a man so animated and flashy in life, his burial is surprisingly understated. He now rests in Forest Hill Cemetery in Nashville, Tennessee, in a modest plot that doesn't scream celebrity at all. There's no giant guitar sculpture or over-the-top tribute, just a simple stone etched with his name and dates. It's so quiet you'd never guess it belonged to one of country music's most entertaining showmen. That contrast is what makes Jerry Reed's resting place strange. Fans expecting the fireworks of his performances are met with a silence that feels almost eerie. But maybe that's the punchline. Maybe the man who made a career out of defying expectations chose one final humble surprise. And somewhere you just know Jerry's grinning about it. Lefty Frizzell. Lefty Frizzell was the voice that helped shape the very soul of country music. Born William Orville Frizzell in 1928 in Texas, he had a smooth, emotional vocal style that influenced everyone from Merle Haggard to George Jones. With hits like If You've Got the Money, I've Got the Time, and Always Late with Your Kisses. Lefty made heartache sound poetic and irresistible. But despite his musical genius, Frizzell's personal life was marred by alcoholism, career mismanagement, and industry burnout. He died young in 1975 at just 47 years old from a massive stroke. The country music world mourned, but his final resting place tells a different, quieter story. Frizzell is buried in Corsicana, Texas, the town where he grew up. But for a man so foundational to country music's golden age, his grave is shockingly modest. There's no statue, no oversized monument, just a small, flat headstone etched with his name, birth and death dates, and the phrase country music legend. What makes Lefty's burial so unusual is the stark contrast between his influence and the simplicity of his tombstone. It's almost jarring how someone who shaped the very sound of a genre could be memorialized with so little fanfare. Yet maybe it fits. Lefty never chased glamour. He just sang his truth. And even in the quiet of Corsicana, his voice still echoes in every twang of every honky-tonk heartbreak. Kitty Wells. Kitty Wells didn't just make history, she rewrote the rules. Born Ellen Muriel Deason in 1919, she broke through the male-dominated country scene with her 1952 hit It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels, becoming the first female country artist to top the charts. For decades, she remained the queen of country music, inspiring generations of women to follow in her footsteps. Wells had a long, graceful career spanning from the Grand Ole Opry stage to presidential performances. She passed away in 2012 at the remarkable age of 92. But her final resting place is a curious paradox when compared to her trailblazing legacy. She is buried at Spring Hill Cemetery in Nashville, Tennessee, among many other country greats. But unlike some of her peers with ornate gravestones or sculpted tributes, Kitty's grave is relatively plain. Even more unusual, her headstone is located near the main road of the cemetery, easily visible to passing cars and strangers. It's a resting place that feels strangely open, less like a sacred private memorial and more like a public exhibit. And that's what makes it so unique. For a woman who pushed against barriers her whole life, she now rests in full view, still unhidden, still standing her ground. Kitty Wells may have been modest in stature, but in country music history her name is monumental. Her grave's quiet elegance, framed by accessibility rather than seclusion, offers a fitting tribute. Kitty never backed down, and even in death she's still out front. Conway Twitty. Harold L. Jenkins. Conway Twitty wasn't just a singer, he was a seducer with a microphone. Born Harold Lloyd Jenkins in 1933, he started his career in rock and roll before sliding seamlessly into country, where his deep, velvety voice delivered over 50 #1 hits. With chart toppers like Hello Darlin' and unforgettable duets with Loretta Lynn, Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man, After the Fire Is Gone. Twitty became synonymous with passion and heartbreak. But when he died in 1993 at age 59 from an abdominal aneurysm, his funeral was kept private, away from the massive public spotlight he once commanded. That contrast extends to his burial site, found not in a grand memorial park, but in Sumner Memorial Gardens in Gallatin, Tennessee. What makes his final resting place so unusual is its format. Twitty isn't buried beneath the ground in a traditional plot. Instead, he rests inside a tomb-style outdoor wall, sharing the space with his wife. Their double tomb is crafted from simple red marble engraved only with their names and a small image of an open Bible. It's strange, even disorienting, to see such a colossal figure of country music entombed with such understated simplicity. For fans expecting gold plaques and guitar-shaped headstones, it feels too quiet. But maybe that's the point. Conway always let the music do the talking. In death as in life, his voice still lingers. Hank Williams Sr. Hank Williams Sr. wasn't just a country singer. He was the country singer. Born in 1923 in Alabama, he poured raw pain and poetry into timeless classics like Your Cheatin' Heart, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, and Cold, Cold Heart. His voice, cracked by sorrow and whiskey, became the blueprint for generations of country legends. But genius often walks hand in hand with tragedy. Hank battled addiction and illness from a young age, and in the early hours of New Year's Day 1953, he died alone in the back seat of a Cadillac en route to a show. He was just 29 years old. His final resting place is as iconic as his music. Buried at Oakwood Annex Cemetery in Montgomery, Alabama. Hank's grave doesn't whisper, it sings. It features an elaborate white stone monument adorned with musical notes, cowboy boots, and guitars. A marble cowboy hat marks the site like a crown. But what makes it truly unusual is its grandeur. Unlike most graves from the 1950s, Hank's is a full-blown shrine. Famous lyrics are etched into the stone, including the haunting line, "I'll never get out of this world alive." His son, Hank Williams Jr., even had a message added asking fans to treat the site with respect. It's not a grave, it's a pilgrimage. And for many, it's where country music was born and mourned. Little Jimmy Dickens. James Cecil Dickens. Standing at just 4 feet 11 inches. Little Jimmy Dickens was living proof that size has nothing to do with legacy. Born in 1920 in West Virginia, Dickens became a beloved figure on the Grand Ole Opry, known for his rhinestone-studded suits, sharp humor, and novelty hits like May the Bird of Paradise Fly Up Your Nose. He was a staple of the country scene for over 6 decades and was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1983. When he passed away in 2015 at age 94, he was the oldest living member of the Grand Ole Opry and one of its most adored. Dickens is buried at Woodlawn Memorial Park in Nashville, Tennessee, among other country greats. His grave itself is modest and respectful, but what makes his memorial unique is actually not at the cemetery. Just steps away from the legendary Ryman Auditorium where Dickens built his career stands a life-sized bronze statue of him smiling wide in his signature cowboy outfit. That statue has become an unofficial memorial, drawing more fan attention than his grave. Tourists pose with it, leave guitar picks and notes at its feet, and thank him for a lifetime of laughter and music. The strange thing, his final tribute isn't where his body lies, but where his spirit lived. Little Jimmy Dickens may be resting in peace, but his smile still greets fans every day in downtown Nashville. In the end, it's the perfect way to remember a man who always stood tall where it counted. Porter Wagoner. Porter Wagoner didn't just perform country music, he wore it quite literally. With his dazzling rhinestone suits, gravity-defying pompadour, and glittering charisma, he became one of the most recognizable figures in country music history. Born in 1927 in Missouri, Wagoner hosted The Porter Wagoner Show from 1960 to 1981, launching the careers of many, including a young Dolly Parton. Behind the TV charm was a deeply committed artist with hits like The Carroll County Accident and Green Green Grass of Home. When he passed away in 2007 at age 80, from lung cancer, country music lost one of its last true showmen. Porter is buried at Woodlawn Memorial Park in Nashville, Tennessee, a fitting location among the stars he once shared stages with. But unlike many peers whose graves are understated, Wagoner's resting place is hard to miss. His tombstone is larger than life, much like the man himself. A towering granite monument with his etched image, full name, and lavish script sets it apart from nearly every other plot in the cemetery. What makes his grave unusual isn't just its size, it's how much it still performs. It feels more like a marquee than a memorial, as if Porter is still headlining even in death. And perhaps that's the legacy he wanted, a reminder that rhinestones never fade, they just shine on differently. Tammy Wynette. Tammy Wynette was country music's first lady of pain, the woman who gave heartbreak a voice. Born Virginia Wynette Pugh in Mississippi in 1942, she became a legend with ballads like Stand By Your Man and Till I Can Make It on My Own. Her songs weren't just chart toppers, they were emotional anthems for millions of women. Tammy's life mirrored her music, turbulent, dramatic, and unforgettable. Multiple marriages, health crises, and a public relationship with George Jones all added to the legend. When she passed away in 1998 at just 55 years old due to a blood clot in her lung, the world mourned a voice that had sung its last sorrow. She was laid to rest at Woodlawn Memorial Park and Mausoleum in Nashville among country royalty. But what makes Tammy's grave stand out is what's happened to it over time. Initially simple and dignified, her tomb has been transformed by fans into something deeply emotional. Letters, flowers, photos, and even lipstick kisses cover the site, left behind by generations who connected with her pain. It's not just a grave, it's a shrine of solidarity. The space feels alive, not with fame, but with feeling. It tells you everything about her legacy. Tammy Wynette didn't just sing about heartbreak. She helped people survive it. And in a cemetery filled with legends, hers might be the most quietly powerful tribute of all. Patsy Cline. Patsy Cline didn't just break hearts, she broke barriers. Born Virginia Patterson Hensley in 1932, she possessed one of the most powerful and recognizable voices in music history. Songs like Crazy I Fall to Pieces and Sweet Dreams turned her into an icon, not just of country music, but of American music as a whole. But her story ended far too soon. In 1963, at just 30 years old, Cline died in a tragic plane crash while returning from a benefit concert. The country world was shaken, and so were her fans, who mourned her like a queen taken before her reign was done. She was buried at Shenandoah Memorial Park in Frederick County, Virginia, next to her husband, Charlie Dick. Their flat double marker bears her birth name with Patsy Cline engraved underneath, along with a touching inscription, "Death cannot kill what never dies." Love. What makes her burial place so unusual is what happened during the funeral. In a wave of grief, fans overwhelmed the service, grabbing flowers, snatching keepsakes, and nearly taking her gold-finished casket. It was chaos born from devotion, and it marked one of the most emotionally charged celebrity burials in country history. Even now, visitors leave gifts and tears at her grave. Patsy may be gone, but her heartbreak still lingers in the wind. Merle Haggard. Merle Haggard lived the life he sang about, hard, honest, and unapologetically real. Born in 1937 during the Great Depression, Haggard spent his early years in a converted boxcar and his young adulthood behind bars. But out of that rough beginning came one of country music's greatest voices. With songs like Mama Tried Okie from Muskogee and Sing Me Back Home, he became the voice of the working man, the rebel, the misunderstood poet. Haggard's music spanned more than 5 decades, earning him every major award in the business and the admiration of peers and presidents alike. But as much as he was public with his music, he was fiercely private about his life, and that included his death. When Merle Haggard passed away on April 6, 2016, his 79th birthday from complications related to pneumonia, his funeral wasn't held at a cathedral or celebrated on a national stage. Instead, it took place on his own ranch in Palo Cedro, California, under strict security, surrounded by only close friends and family. His burial site remains hidden even to fans. Nestled somewhere on his private land, likely just steps from a simple fence line, there are no public images, no massive stone monuments, just stillness. Unless you're invited, you can't get close. What makes Merle's resting place so unusual is its inaccessibility. While other stars lie in public memorials, Merle chose solitude. It's almost poetic. After a lifetime of singing for millions, he now rests in silence, far from the spotlight. But for those who know his music, they don't need a gravestone to find him. They find him in every guitar strum, every dusty highway, every lyric that says what most men never could. These burial sites are more than just final destinations. They're reflections of who these country legends truly were, both on stage and off. Some chose grand monuments, others vanished into quiet corners of the world. But each one tells a story that goes far beyond the music. Which grave surprised you the most? And do you think fame should follow someone into death? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more legends, mysteries, and truths only, here on Uncovered Tinseltown Uncovered.